We are live.
It says we're live, yes. So, fantastic. Okay, we are here.
We are here, and
have
home is in the
arrived.
moment.
So that home is the moment. That's where we are right now.
Well,
And
for anyone that may watch later, and as people filter on in the next few minutes, I can spend a minute contextualizing that home is in the moment phrase. Chris and I just came up with that.
Yeah.
In conversation about mindfulness through COVID-19 and how, he asked me if I was going home because I'm in France right now. And I contemplated that for a moment, and I'm like, well, where is home now? Because I couldn't get home, still can't really, with flights repeatedly getting canceled, borders still closed. And so I've had to really lean into mindfulness around staying present to where I am geographically and calling that home. And that's just such a different notion from how we think about home in general. Home doesn't fluctuate, right? It's this stable thing that's in a geographical location, and that's home. But we've heard the expression home is where the heart is. And I think that's what we're leaning into with Chris's awesome phrasing, home is in the moment. In this moment right now, wherever we are, that's where home is. That's where our present roots are planted. And if we're going to abide, which I certainly do, by the idea that the only reality we really have is in the right here and the right now, right? Yesterday's gone, tomorrow's yet to happen. So now is the only reality we have. That's what we're practicing with mindfulness, is being grounded in the only reality we have. So we'll call that home. We'll call this home right now, right here.
Right now.
On this live. This is home.
This is home. Fantastic. All right. Great. Well, I think it's amazing to have breakthroughs before things even start. I think I'm a changed man already, just from the 5 minutes before the thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really.
Thanks, man.
It just shows how good you really are, Pax. Getting very good, wonderful.
Table flip.
The whole table flip and everything.
Mic drop, table flip, all of it.
Do a mic drop now. So just a few minutes. Thanks for anyone who is tuning in early. This is the unscripted portion of the show. No,
this is our bloopers reel starting now.
No, I mean, yeah, sometimes it's the best. That's the best stuff sometimes, really.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. I did an interview just about 2 weeks ago now, and it was for a podcast. And so we get on and just jumping off as soon as we saw each other on camera, he said, so how are things? How are things going in France? And I just started talking. And it was just infused with gems, when you're not thinking about it and you're just kind of speaking from the heart and feeling into a conversation from that place, gem drops. And he wasn't recording. I was like, no! People could have benefited from that, but
oh wow,
all good. It was real. It was a real moment. And so yes, to your point, a lot of the best stuff, a lot of the gems happen sort of before and after, before you're on the record, after you go off the record, but hopefully you're always still recording.
Exactly. Hopefully that's the moral of the story. Always be recording, always be present.
So Chris, can you see if anyone's joining or who joins, when they join? Are you able to see that on this medium, or are we just kind of...
All right. So hold on here. Okay, we are great. If you have liked it, our event here, and I can see it on the page. There's a bit of a delay, actually. So I will monitor both places to see if we have any questions. And
okay, great. Because I'm flying blind in that sense, so I'm going to leave it to you to monitor questions.
So I am both engineer here and host.
All right, great.
I'm doing double duty.
Awesome.
So bear with me. It is 10 o'clock here. So, wow, great. Okay, well, welcome to Red Feather Mind Body Spirit's first Facebook Live event. I'm Christopher McClure, and today we have a very special guest, our author, Pax Tandon. Pax is the author of Mindfulness Matters, A Guide to Mastering Your Life. And we wanted to catch up today because we have just released Mindfulness Matters on audio, which is Red Feather's first audiobook. So a lot of firsts we're celebrating today. And just a little bit of the background on Pax. In addition to being an author, Pax is a producer, a wellness advocate, a teacher, and sought-after speaker. She holds a master's degree in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, along with a long list of other degrees and certifications in areas of psychology, yoga, past life regression, and of course, mindfulness. She combines this professional training with real-life experience to communicate in a way that resonates with audiences, motivating and guiding them towards an enriched quality of life. In her book, Mindfulness Matters, A Guide to Mastering Your Life, it really gives the insider scoop on how to have a fully flourishing life, encompassing deep dives into mind, body, spirit, and the science of positive psychology, infused with the practice of mindfulness to learn how to build an optimally efficient body and commit to an elevation of your spirit. So, Max, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Staying mindful. How about you?
Same. Doing the best. Best I can.
Good. That's all we can do, and that is quite sufficient.
Exactly. So it's really exciting that we have your audiobook launching here. I've listened to it. It's really incredible. I've been wanting to know for a long time, what really inspired you to write Mindfulness Matters in the first place? What was your inspiration for that?
Well, Chris, depends on how far back you want to go. I can honestly say that this seed was planted, maybe in the womb, but I can certainly tell you that as soon as I could understand what books were, I wanted them. I was a voracious reader as a child, insatiable appetite for all things books. I was the hungry caterpillar, and it was hard for my mom to keep up with my appetite for books. So it started that young with books, and so it wasn't a stretch, that I had a book, at least, if not multiple, inside me waiting to be written. But as far as Mindfulness Matters, the real inflection point happened along the journey about 4 or 5 years ago, I would say, at this point. I had just been having so many conversations with a lot of different people in a one-on-one context, just about my journey through positive psychology, through mindfulness, all of the healing modalities that you mentioned earlier in that beautiful introduction. And along that journey, I discovered that people were so thirsty for what I had to offer. And they really wanted this information on what it really took to live a life of well-being. And so I ended up having all of these convos one-on-one, including with the media world in various formats, radio, print, television. And it was in one such interview that I met a young woman who asked me, "Have you ever thought about writing a book, Pax?" And this young woman happened to work at Schiffer at the time. So props to Andrea. She really planted that seed in that interview for me to really get serious about thinking, I have thought about it, and universe, I'm listening. Now is clearly the time. It was just a convergence of forces. And so that led to crafting a book proposal with the great help of my then publicist. Another shout out to Garden here for getting that ball rolling, submitting, to Schiffer first and foremost, because Andrea was working at Schiffer at the time, as I mentioned. And it just went from there. And, again, this comes back to a love and an appreciation that I've always had for the world of media, print, TV, radio, in every capacity, just to disseminate information quickly and rapidly, and in that moment, the convergence was, oh yes, of course. I had been a bit exhausted and frustrated having these conversations one-on-one, in parallel, and realized the potency that I could leverage to give this information and be of service in this way to people en masse if I compiled it all in a one-stop shop resource. you know, and then gave it to the world in that way. And Mindfulness Matters was born.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's so much good in the book there. I have a copy of it somewhere. It's just amazing. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, throw it out there. Woo!
Yeah, right now. But it's just that, you know, it's just packed with so much goodness. And so now we have this where you can just like sit back and listen to it. So what were some of the, you know, what did you enjoy about making the audiobook version of Mindfulness Matters?
Oh, I mean, I loved it because I love voiceover work. You know, one of the things that had occurred to me, which is why this project meant so much to me to do and to voice it myself, was that over the years, you know, when I would guide meditations, when I would do my coaching work with clients, when I would do radio spots in particular, I would often get this feedback that what people were really resonating with was my voice. That when I guided meditations, you know, and helped people through the practice of mindfulness in particular, they just found something about my voice soothing and calming, and therefore they were better able to access that connection, right, to the practice, to the material of sitting in silence and stilling the mind, and, you know, connecting with your inner self, connecting with the universe, all of the beautiful things that come with the practices. And I really took that into my heart. You know, I really heard that. And so when I was creating Mindfulness Matters, the physical book, I had always had that in the back of my mind, that I knew the material would just translate differently if I could bring it to life through my voice. And so that was sort of the impetus for me around gunning for the audiobook project. And more props, gratitude to Pete at Schiffer, to you, Chris, with Red Feather, for getting behind this project with me. And bringing it to life, because I really loved recording it. I know, you know, that I knocked it out in 3 days, and that shocked everyone.
I think the technician is still kind of like just amazed by that. It might be a record actually for the studio.
Yes, well, all kinds of pioneering efforts here, right? Because
I know, right?
Schiffer's first audiobook project, my first audiobook project for sure. And if we broke records, awesome. I think it just speaks to the passion which I had around the material. I was just in love with being able to do this, and again, voice it myself. So that was my favorite part of the journey, actually, just doing it, getting in the studio and recording it.
That's great. And just to your point, really I'm a big fan of audiobooks. And when I was kind of starting my metaphysical journey, I cut my teeth on a lot of Deepak Chopra, both books and audio, you know, as a lot of, you know, seekers have. And so just it's like having the book is one thing, but having the authentic, and they were all read by him, having the authentic voice of this teacher was kind of like reinforcing it in the car or wherever, to be able to have these principles kind of like sink in. It's very powerful and a different way of learning, and it kind of steeps in there. And I think it's another dimension of, you know, making it part of your life. So that's really great.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I certainly channeled that as well. You know, it really meant something to me to be able to have my voice reaching people as I guided them through this material. So it really feels like I'm holding your hand through it, you know, and coaching you every step of the way, telling you stories that solidify the material, all that good stuff. But it's like, you know, you've got Pax in your living room or in your car hanging out with you, and that's what I wanted. Just a very connected, heartfelt, friendly journey through this.
Right. No, that's wonderful and very powerful as well. So, were there any challenges that you came across as this was coming up? You know, you have the good stuff, but or was it all great?
Yeah, you know, I will say this. That's a great question, because you know, the editing process of writing a book and bringing the book to life is interesting. You know, it's a different level of having to think about the material, right? It's macro to very micro. It's very detail oriented. So when Mindfulness Matters, the physical book, was published, I was like, done with editing forever, you know, at least with that project.
Yeah.
And then I realized that when we were making the audiobook, I had to go back through the whole book and fine tune and edit with a comb,
Wow.
again, to be mindful of how this had to translate in audio form. Right. So even if it was something as simple as picking up on a place in the book where I might say to my readers, I had to tweak that to my listeners, or for portions of the book where I'm priming journaling activities, right? That had to translate differently to the ear, and then guiding you to my website, as it were, to get the material that you need to finish the exercises. So it wasn't that in and of itself was difficult. It was having to go back through the whole book and look at it in such detailed fashion to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Because
Right.
once you're in the studio recording, that studio time's expensive. You can't spend time tweaking and editing there. So I had to really make sure that was all done ahead of time.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of work, but definitely worthwhile, because you want to be able to translate into that form. So with the two, how do you feel then that this book is a complement to the actual physical book? Could you explore that for me?
Yeah, great question. There's such a good tag team. I alluded a bit to this before, but having the physical book, right, and the subtitle is A Guide to Mastering Your Life, because given the material in the book, the science, the studies, the journaling activities, the practices and exercises, when you complete that journey with the physical book, you've actually got a guidebook that is very personalized to your life. So you've made the material in the book that I teach and instruct around very personal by doing the activities and practices, right? So, and that was really why we did that. We wanted to make this a guidebook for people to carry around with them as a resource forever, for the journey of life. That said, again, I wanted the audiobook to translate very personally for people, so that you really felt my presence with you along that journey. And so with the physical book, in your hands, and the audiobook with me sort of metaphorically holding your hand, these two are perfectly complementary to each other in bringing you that much farther on the journey, and really feeling like I'm there supporting you, encouraging you, and guiding you.
Great. That they really are an amazing compliment. Are there parts that of the book, of the message that you've, both the physical and the audio form, that you can maybe share with the audience here, that you might not have heard, or is out there in other areas, like some of your favorites, your favorite portions of what you've created?
Yeah, absolutely. So, aside from the clear theme of the book, that mindfulness matters, and then contained within it all of the matters of mindfulness and a mindful life, that's sort of the ostensible thing that I want you to take away. But there is a sub theme that I think when you read it or when you listen to the audiobook, you'll realize is foundational. And you'll get that just from the way that I projected. And that is the idea of flow and the idea of purpose, and how these two come together, right? That when you are listening to your heart and you learn through mindfulness and meditative practices how to attune to your innermost self, how to listen to that heart talk, that gut instinct, you start to develop a connection with the universe that puts you in flow. In other words, you're going downstream, as Abraham Hicks or other spiritual guides and teachers will talk about. You're going downstream. And so that's the active process of flowing with the universe, right? And all the gifts that it has for you to receive. But a lot of us don't get this right. I certainly in my life have not always really understood how to do that. And then it was signaled to me by consistent depression, anxiety, negative emotions, swimming in this soup of things that didn't feel pleasant, because I wasn't living my truth. And so one of the things that I really wanted to get across in Mindfulness Matters, and that will translate when you receive the material, is this idea of the foundational importance in your life of developing a flow with the universe and learning how to listen to what it's saying to you and abide by it. Honoring it above all is where a lot of us get stuck, where we're looking for external sources of validation. So our parents, society, what have you, their version of what we should be, who we should be. And we need to make this an intrinsic awareness of who we really are, and then have the courage to project that out into the world, no matter what courageous steps it may take. For me, it required, sort of cutting ties to most of the things in my world, and living in France for a while, to really access my bliss point. So, this idea of following your flow, attending to who you really are and what you're about, and then watching how portals open, doors open, the universe responds, and you end up living this far more easeful, blissful existence.
Yeah, really, the flow is incredibly important, and just the stillness is where, for myself too, where I get some of my best insights is just being still and silent, so you can have the access to that inspiration. Really, I wrote down the word courage. I write notes a lot, as you're talking, and it does really take a lot of courage to live your authentic self, to not be beholden to all those things that pull at you, and really live that. And that's an important message, for people to understand, and the importance of mindfulness itself. So within this, you have a wonderful way of communicating. How did you first learn that you were able to kind of like change people's lives really with your message?
That's a powerful one, because there is a definite inflection point, pivot point, where I really understood the value of what I had learned on my journey and was starting to teach. And that really happened through a trauma from my mother. We had an armed robbery at our office in West Philadelphia. I come from a family business, a family of real estate, this business that my parents had started decades ago. And we had an armed robbery at the office. And at that time, I nor my father were present there. It was my mother who was there, and she was pretty brutally attacked, and in the aftermath suffered PTSD. And I was just coming out of graduate school for positive psychology when this happened. And just starting my journey with mindfulness. And it was so divinely designed, I could say, that all of this happened, because through that time, I took my mother to sort of the usual suspects of triage, right? The doctor treating her insomnia that she had chronically from this PTSD. She couldn't sleep. And so she was prescribed sleeping pills, which were then making her hallucinate. They were causing her to faint, all kinds of gnarly side effects. It just, it wasn't working for her life. Going to the psychiatrist, having him prescribe antipsychotics. What they were effectively doing was just making her a shell of who she originally was. She was just a walking zombie version of herself. Taking her to the psychologist, right, for the talk therapy. And when I would join her there, which I did after a few sessions, just realizing they weren't making progress, we made rapid progress because I was able to fill in the gaps. But when my mother went alone, there was something that the psychologist wasn't understanding about her cultural norms, right? We don't talk about that stuff in India, right? She did not grow up with those modalities, so she didn't know how to share to the extent that she could be helped. And so across the board, I was seeing the system fail her. And I was seeing her get worse and worse, not sleeping, losing massive amounts of weight, just zombie. And so I just started to give her what I knew, what I had just learned in graduate school, what I was learning in my mindfulness sessions, and she was getting better. And through this process of a daughter's love for her mother and a mother's love for her daughter, you know, this tag team that we were building, she could trust me to just guide her with what I knew was helpful. And ultimately, it just turned out that those practices, those exercises were really helping her improve. I took her to an integrative health doctor who very quickly got under the root of her insomnia, and she was getting back on track. So I saw in very real time with one of the closest people to me in the world how all of this knowledge, these practices, these healing modalities that I had been studying, which really get its source, right? It's the source of problems rather than a lot of what we tend to do, which is numb the symptoms. Get rid of the symptoms. Does that really mean you've got a cure? So getting to the source was really what I was committed to. And I saw this in real time working with my mother after this trauma. And that was a huge pivot point for me in really trusting this work, trusting this journey that I was on, and knowing that this could be of service and benefit to the world at large.
Sure. Well, it goes back to, you know, the courage we talked about before, and trusting, and to be able to have that knowledge and be able to so positively affect someone that you care about so deeply is a powerful way to kind of, you know, move you forward in your journey, you know, and her journey as well. So I'm sure that, so how does, you know, then how does your family then, you know, feel, or how do they live with, you know, your influence here and you being a spiritual influencer?
Well, I'll start by saying that I can certainly tell you now it's something that they're very proud of, you know, just because it's so purposeful and serviceful, this work. Right. That said, it hasn't always been easy for them to swallow. You know, I've got immigrant parents. They're citizens now, you know, but when they first came to the United States from India, they were immigrants and new immigrants. And so the one thing that they really wanted for their family, for their children, was stability and security in this new country, because that's the one thing they didn't have. And so this journey was always for them about ensuring our stability. And this journey as a spiritual influencer, if you will, is a very entrepreneurial one. Anybody that follows this journey will tell you the same, because it's not validated still by the world of medicine in the same way as traditional therapies, right? So, you know, health insurance, for example, may not cover most of these alternative therapies, which I call de rigueur. That's why I put it in quotes. I think acupuncture, mindfulness, Reiki, yoga, these are your first points of defense, right? Taking vitamins, eating healthy foods, exercising. These are all things that are the first line of defense against disease, against dis-ease or imbalance. And yet we don't support that in our society. We don't advocate for prevention. We do the cure thing. Okay, now you're sick, take these medicines, take these drugs. And so, you know, we're still not supported as healers, as spiritual influencers, to do the work that we do in a way that makes us accessible to people, right? So if you don't have insurance covering a visit to me and you have to pay out of pocket, that's a huge barrier to entry to getting this work. And so, you know, of course, there's inherently then a bit of instability on that journey. It's very entrepreneurial. We kind of have to do our own advocacy. We have to get creative about, okay, if somebody can't afford to see me, I need to give them this service. How can I subsidize my time and my livelihood elsewhere? And getting creative with designing a different way of being, which is non-traditional. And so for my parents in particular, watching me go through this journey has been interesting because one day, I'll have a brand ambassadorship that pays really well, and I can see my clients and do that work. And, I'm healthily supported on my journey.
Yep.
Another day, none of that may exist. I may not have a certain amount of clients in that time. My brand ambassadorship has run through. I'm looking for the next gig, and they're just like, ah, oh my God, are we gonna have to support you for the rest of our lives? So it's a journey that goes like this, and it makes it dynamic. But for parents that really want stability and security for their child, it can be a bit of a nail biter at times. So, certainly also after that experience with my mother, I think her heart opened to what I do in a very different way. Because she was personally so impacted by it and so positively impacted. So she supports it fully in her heart. My father too. They're the biggest advocates for any and all things well-being that I've ever found in my life. It was through their encouragement, and through them subsidizing it a lot of the times. My father saying, do the mindfulness course, I will support you 100%, because he was about it. He's like, that stuff is good. So they get it. And I think it really is on the world now to recognize where health and vitality really lie. And again, it's in prevention, not cure. And if we all get behind that, then there's a great amount of support for any spiritual influencers, any healers that may still be considered, alternative.
Right. Well, it's wonderful to have that support, and it speaks to me that I think that you've just been on a mission here to change lives and to change the way people look at these kind of therapies, and I think, I was struck by, I'm not sure if you read any Stephen Covey, but he had a term called trim tabbing, where if you're going to move a big ship, you have two rudders. You have a big rudder and you have a small rudder, which is trim tab. And so to move a large ship, which in this case might be like traditional medicine, you're not going to move it all at once with a big rudder. You're going to move it with a little rudder and move it with that little bit that changes the direction of things. And I think with things like such as Mindfulness Matters, it's doing that. It's able to gain more acceptance for these very important kinds of therapies. So it's really important, and have that support too is great. And I applaud you for your mission that you're on. So
thank you.
Of course. So
I appreciate that. And I must say then at this juncture again, my gratitude to Schiffer and Red Feather and the whole team, you and Pete and everyone else, Dinah, for supporting this book and this journey. That's part of it, is publishing the book, all the material that I had to give in this form that people en masse could receive. And I definitely do hold so much gratitude in my heart for that, and certainly talk about a lot of these different modalities in the book to expose people to what they may not be aware of, and also help to carry that tide, to gun those rudders, if you will, so that they can go a little bit faster and move us in the direction of health and well-being.
Right. That's wonderful. So with all these things that you're doing, with the mission that you're on, so what's your own spiritual practice like? How do you take time or make time for yourself? What's that like?
So the one anchor point every day that I engage with without fail is a seated practice. Generally about 30 minutes, a little bit minus depending on the day, but usually plus. And this is just where I sit and practice mindfulness actively, where, I'm really doing the breath work, focusing on the breath and ensuring that I'm steadying and stilling my mind to cultivate clarity, to cultivate focus, to cultivate staying present, right? That ability to be anchored in the present moment, which is really the definition of mindfulness, but also to be able to sit with what's uncomfortable and not judge it. So that's a daily practice for me, or other forms of meditation and silent contemplation. One of my favorites is a third eye meditation. So I just listen to a combination of Tibetan bowls and frequencies that, are on one of my favorite apps. It's called Insight Timer. I love it. They have tons of different styles of meditation. And that one I find very powerful for me personally, to just drop into the third eye, right? So with these eyes closed, letting the third eye open, stilling the mind, I'm able to access a very, very powerful state of being where I really feel in connection with the universe, and I can download guidance very quickly in that way. And that helps me stay very aligned and purposeful from an open-hearted place, from a third eye universe. What would you like from me? Sort of place, very authentic and deliberate. So that's a daily practice for me. Beyond that, I'm in a spot right now, an apartment in a place called Arcachon, close to Bordeaux in the southwest of France. And it's just replete and resplendent with nature. There's forest here. I'm right by the beach and the water. The largest sand dune in Europe is here. And I say that not to make anybody jelly or hate me. I say it to remind people of how powerful and important a role nature plays in our lives.
Sure.
When I get close to nature, I'm with nature, I'm amongst nature. It's a meditation of its own. I feel very at ease. I feel, again, connected with the universe. I feel in flow. All of the things that I talked about that I access in a seated meditation, I just feel the potency of without having to do much but hug a tree, right? Or be in the water or hike a sand dune. And so nature is one of those elements that's consistently present in my life. And if I spend too much time in a city, then I'm deliberate about getting back to nature to meditate on just the pure and good vibes that nature brings.
That's wonderful. Anyone that I know who is connected as you are, is you talked about downloading. That's a true, when you're in that zone and you truly connect with the source, it is kind of like a download. It's just a download. As you spoke earlier, the flow is multiple directions, kind of multi-directional in a sense. It's downward and out. Not to get too metaphysical, but this is a metaphysical.
No, it's a matrix, Chris. You're so right.
Let's meta it up.
You're right. So, it's meta and it's matrix, and I love that you said that, because we often forget it. We often forget that life and time are not linear. That's just a construct. Like, we made that up. Right? The way that energy really works is in this matrix fashion, and we're swimming in the soup of it. This idea of separateness is also an illusion. It's kind of the linear way of thinking about life, but it's not that way. Every cell in our bodies is interconnected and connected to the world around us, to this ether, right? And we're all swimming in it. So it's totally matrix. That's totally what it matrix.
Is. Yeah. So we'll have to have you back on sometime to talk about one of my favorite topics is non-duality. And
For sure.
So that's a whole different thing. Maybe a different book.
Fair enough. We'll co-author it.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Sounds good. Great. So how can people connect with you, or then to get your message? Social media, or how can people interact with you?
Yeah, I am on social. I think the best format these days is Instagram. My handle on Instagram is @Pax Tandon, so @PAXTANDON. And you can DM me there for probably the quickest turnaround. And actually these days, every Friday at noon, I go live in a discussion very similar to this, in terms of sort of live video chat format. And I'm just having conversations with influencers, with people from varied sectors and perspectives on the work that they do, the power that they're bringing through their voice or their service, and how that intersects with mindfulness and the matters of mindfulness. So that's my most recent project. Very powerful conversations are happening. Lots of gems being dropped right and left. So that's every Friday at noon on Instagram. And you can hook in with us live. So that, I think, is the best way to interact with me. You can pop questions in the chat, and it ends up being a very dynamic and engaging discussion on all fronts. Aside from that, I'm on Facebook, a little bit less present than Instagram, but definitely on Facebook at Pax Tandon also, and Twitter as well. So you'll find me if you want to find me. It's not too hard with the at Pax Tandon handle across platforms. And then, of course, my website, paxtandon.com, is a great repository of information on who I am, what I do, a lot of the projects that I've engaged with recently. The book is there. My short film is there. We talked briefly at the beginning. I think you mentioned my producing hat that I wear sometimes.
Right.
So I produced a short film also called Mindfulness Matters, and that's on the website for people to access, making the rounds on the film festival circuit the last year, which has been amazing and powerful. And so there's a contact form and ability on the website too. So that comes to my email. It's a little less direct, but people can certainly get in touch with me that way as well.
Fantastic. I'm looking to see if we have any questions here. I don't see any right now, but it could have been just the nature of the program I'm using. So if you had questions, please put them in the comments then after our recording is finished up. Well, thank you so much, Pax, and thanks to everyone who tuned in to this live event. It was a fantastic experience. I loved it. Hopefully, Pax, you did too. And so Mindfulness Matters, A Guide to Mastering Your Life audiobook is available on Amazon through their Audible platform. And we'll have a link in the comments. It's also available on iTunes, Hoopla, audiobooks.com, Findaway, Faithlife, Overdrive, Blackstone, and Koorong. It's also available in physical form, of course, as I showed you here, this beautiful physical form, of course, on redfeathermbs.com or wherever books are sold. It's also available on ebook. So there are so many ways to discover how to master your life the mindful way. So many thanks to you all, and have a truly beautiful day.
Thanks so much, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Bye now.
Toodles.